when Senator Tommy Tuberville burst into laughter during a heated exchange with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett on live television. The audience expected the Texas Democrat to fire back with her usual sharp wit, but instead she reached into her bag and calmly pulled out an old, folded piece of paper, a letter her late father had written during the Vietnam War, and a sudden shift in tone sucked the air out of the room. With the cameras rolling and millions watching, Crockett explained that while Tuberville mocked her positions and tried to belittle her with dismissive laughter, she carried with her the words of a man who had risked everything for his country, a man who never laughed at sacrifice, never laughed at justice, and never laughed at the struggles of those who served and their families. She began to read, her voice steady but heavy with emotion, and the words are written decades ago from the jungles of Vietnam spoke of fear, hope, and the dream of a country that would one day treat every citizen with dignity, regardless of color, wealth, or status. The letter described nights under fire, friends lost, and the unshakable belief that service meant something deeper than politics or party lines, and as she read, Tuberville's smirk dissolved into stunned silence, his laughter evaporating into awkward stillness as the weight of her father's words crashed over the studio. By the time she finished, the audience was on its feet, clapping and shouting in support, while Tuberville sat frozen, unable to summon a comeback, exposed not by Crockett's sarcasm or her famous fiery style, but by the undeniable truth of a soldier's sacrifice and a daughter's unwavering pride. That moment, captured in real time, spread across social media like wildfire, not as a typical political sparring clip, but as a gut-wrenching reminder of respect, sacrifice, and the power of memory, leaving Tuberville not just speechless, but forever linked to a viral humiliation where his mockery was drowned out by the echo of a Vietnam veteran's words. As the clip continued to circulate, what stood out most was not just Jasmine Crockett's poise but the sheer contrast between her dignity and Tommy Tuberville's thoughtless laughter, because when she unfolded that weathered letter on live TV, viewers saw a side of her rarely shown in political theatrics, a daughter channeling the voice of her father, a soldier who had lived through the horrors of war and still clung to the hope of a better America. Networks replayed the footage on loop, highlighting Tuberville's smug chuckles fading into visible discomfort as Crockett read lines about sleepless nights in the jungle, about brothers in arms who never made it home, about believing that sacrifice should pave the way for a country where no leader would ever mock pain or dismiss service. Veterans groups immediately rallied behind her, issuing statements condemning Tuberville's reaction and praising Crockett for honoring her father's memory in such a profound way, and hashtags like #VietnamLetter and #Tuberville Silence trended within hours, with countless Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike sharing stories of their own fathers, mothers, and grandparents who had served. Commentators noted that Crockett had done something extraordinary. She had shifted the confrontation from petty political sparring to universal reminder of sacrifice, and in doing so, she struck a chord with millions who felt that politics had forgotten the human cost behind freedom. Tuberville's team scrambled to put out statements insisting he didn't mean to disrespect veterans, but the damage was done, and each replay of his laughter followed by his stunned silence made his apology ring hollow. Crockett, meanwhile, emerged not only as a fierce debater but as a guardian of memory and respect, showing that sometimes the strongest clapback isn't a fiery insult or a clever jab, but the quiet, unshakable truth of a soldier's words echoing through his daughter's voice, leaving the mockery buried under the weight of sacrifice that no laughter could ever erase. In the days that followed, the exchange took on a life of its own, dominating headlines, sparking talk show debates, and igniting a wave of emotion across social media, because Jasmine Crockett's decision to read her father's Vietnam letter wasn't just a political move, it was a cultural moment that exposed the widening gaps between performative politics and genuine sacrifice. Clips of Tuberville laughing before being silenced by the letter were slowed down, dissected, and memified, but unlike most viral political clashes, this one carried an unmistakable moral weight, with veterans' families flooding timelines with images of their loved ones in uniform, captions like "They didn't laugh and this is why we serve." Editorials across the spectrum weighed in, with even conservative-leaning outlets admitting that Tuberville's laughter had been ill-timed and unbecoming, while progressive voices hailed Crockett for elevating the conversation above partisan mudslinging. In interviews, Crockett explained that her father had never sought recognition or glory, only the chance to live in a country worthy of his sacrifice, and that she carried his words to remind herself and others that leadership requires humility, not arrogance. That message resonated far beyond Capitol Hill, reaching classrooms where teachers played the clip as a lesson in respect, empathy, and the power of history, while churches and community gatherings echoed its themes of sacrifice and remembrance. Tuberville, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure as veterans groups publicly demanded an apology not just to Crockett but to every family who had ever lost someone in service, and his silence in the face of those demands only amplified the impression that he had been thoroughly humbled. For millions watching, the image of him shrinking in his chair while Crockett's voice rang out with her father's words became symbolic of a larger truth, that laughter and arrogance crumble when confronted with the raw, unfiltered reality of sacrifice, and that sometimes the most devastating takedown isn't loud or angry, but quiet, steady, and unforgettable. What made the moment grow even larger was how it shifted Jasmine Crockett's public image almost overnight, because while she had already built a reputation as one of the fiercest and sharpest voices in Congress, the Vietnam letter episode revealed a side of her that was deeply personal and profoundly human, reminding Americans that behind the fiery speeches and political battles was a daughter carrying the legacy of a man who had bled for his country. That authenticity struck a nerve in a political climate where so much feels rehearsed and artificial, and suddenly Crockett was being praised praised not only by her base but by independents and even some disillusioned conservatives who said they couldn't help but respect the way she honored her father. Cable news hosts replayed her reading in long segments, noting how Tuberville's arrogance had backfired so spectacularly that it highlighted exactly what voters say they are sick of: performative disrespect and cheap laughs in the face of real sacrifice. Social media turned her father's words into viral quotes, with Instagram pages and TikTok reels pairing the letters' passages with images of veterans standing tall in uniform, creating a powerful current of respect that Tuberville's team couldn't drown out no matter how many times they tried to spin his behavior. Veterans organizations began inviting Crockett to speak at events, praising her for standing up for service members past and present, while Tuberville found himself increasingly isolated, his misstep becoming a defining low point in his career. What really stung for him was that every time he tried to change the narrative, the video of his smirk fading into stunned silence resurfaced, replayed like a permanent scar on his credibility. For Crockett, though, the moment became a rallying cry, proving that politics isn't just about clashing egos but about remembering the sacrifices that give people the freedom to argue in the first place, and in that instant, she had transformed her father's private words into a public reckoning, leaving Tuberville to face the fallout of his own misplaced laughter. The fallout from the confrontation reached a boiling point as the public conversation spiraled beyond the walls of Congress, with veterans, activists, and everyday Americans turning Jasmine Crockett's reading of her father's Vietnam letter into something far larger than a political skirmish. It became a moral referendum on respect, service, and the values leaders claim to represent. Because while Tommy Tuberville scrambled to defend himself with awkward interviews and half-hearted statements about misunderstandings, the images of him laughing at the very moment Crockett unfolded the letter